You can just like sleep.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. We're gonna get started. It's 11 o'clock. I'd like to start and end on time. So y'all can one get food and also get to test this class on time.
We appreciate that.
Yes, I do my best to stay on track. I do my best to do that. So appreciate you all for coming today. A little bit different than the way we did it in the past. And yet, we're going to have some fun with our Black history and real estate today. It's not strictly Philadelphia history. It is Black history and real estate overall. And I'm going to share this before I even jump into everything else. Alex, I think I was telling you this. I went to a conference this past weekend. It was a great conference, large. It's called Multiplicity. And it is a conference of pastors and elders and ministers and people in the church from all over the state of New Jersey, and then also in Philadelphia as well. Great. Different political backgrounds, all that. How can we work together better as a church? Awesome conference. Great information shared the entire time, right? 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday. Awesome. And then you walk out and you're like, where was the application? Mm-hmm. Everyone had great insight, great data, great information. And yet when it came to people being able to walk out and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I should be doing, this is how I can get started, this is how I can actually grow and be the change, or as I would like to say, be the bridge that I like to be. How does that happen? We were left empty on that. Mm-hmm. So because of that, here's what happened. I went home and I started looking over my presentation. I said, how do I change this so that way it's not just information? When we walk out of the room, it's actually going to be different. Mm-hmm. People will actually be able to say, this is what I get to do in my business, or this is how I get to assist other people in their businesses and their lives. Does that sound like it makes a little sense? 100%. Yes. Awesome. I love it. So again, welcome to the class, Black History and Real Estate, sponsored by KW Empower and Coalition Properties Group. Where I love to share this. It's the reason that I am in real estate. It's the reason that our team is in real estate. And it's because we are to be the bridge to the community for all things real estate, lifestyle, and wealth. Right? We're looking to help others create and build a life, create and build the wealth that they're looking to have through what we know and love, which is real estate. All right, so that's a little bit there. Boom. I'll tell you about this random guy that's going to be in front of the room with y'all today. That's me. Before anything else, I was just sharing, I haven't been in the office in like 2.5, 3 weeks. That's because I stand on the very first line. I am not a realtor first. I'm not a coach first, right? None of that stuff. I'm a husband and a father first. All that comes first. And I got a call from my wife. It's like, I'm not feeling well. I was like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. I left the office and I didn't come back until today. Philly native, born and raised in Philly, even though apparently to some people I don't sound like it. That's fine. I've been living in Texas for 11 years. I've been in real estate now for 10 years, started off in Texas, moved back up here, would love to go back to Texas. My wife's not having it. National real estate instructor and trainer. She's not having it. Why do you shake your head at me?
We need you.
This is true. We can do this on Zoom. We're on Zoom. No, I'm the extension leader for Coalition Properties Group, and currently we serve New Jersey, PA, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Virginia, and California as of about 3 months ago. So that's all fun, great stuff. The reason we're actually here, right? Stuff that actually makes sense while we're in the room. We're going to talk a little about some Black history facts. All right, I'm going to give y'all some quizzes. If you know the answer, you are not allowed to answer. All right, I'm looking at some people like, I don't know, Leah, JP, Lauren for sure. You're not allowed to answer. Okay, because I already talked to y'all about this. We're going to talk a little bit about the wealth gap and the housing gap and what that looks like specifically in the Philadelphia area. You see, I got a lot of notes up here. I may or may not actually look at them. I more so do it so you can know that I actually did some research. Okay, and then I think what's most important in talking about how we got here and how we move forward. Right, and that's where everybody in the room plays a part, and it's me more of a mastermind session there. All right, so also men also may not be able to answer this question because you might know, so I don't know. Don't answer me. Who is this person? Well, you're not allowed to answer either because you know I'm joking.
The real estate.
There. Yes.
He's a real estate commissioner.
Yes. No.
You're good.
I was gonna say last year.
Yes, it was last year. But not even last year, no, I
You
just.
can just look him up. Okay. So, yes, his name is Ben Slayton. Ben Slayton is who we would look at and call the first black realtor. And I'll put an asterisk on that. Okay, I'll put an asterisk on that. Does anybody know when he became realtor? In the 60s? All right. All right. I said this to somebody else and they were like, he's still alive? I was like, well, some people don't realize that this was not very long. Right? He became a realtor in 1964.
I know where I know him from now. I used him for like his 3-month post last year for the Adams team. I did a lot of research to find all the first black people and everything real estate and construction related. Use that for content, and also I learned so much. I was so surprised because again, like 60s was not that.
Not that long ago. He's still, not only is he still living and he's still participating in real estate, he's still building businesses. He also owns one of the first black mortgage companies. You ever heard of Legacy Home Loans based out of California? That's also Ben Slayton. Now let's talk a little bit about how Ben Slayton got into real estate. First of all, the reason it's so important that he became a member or he became the first black realtor in 1964 is because before that, you were not allowed to be black and a realtor. As a matter of fact, when you talk about what's quote unquote the good old boys club, that is 100% what it looked like to be a part of the National Association of Realtors, where you had to be sponsored and voted in to become a member of the National Association of Realtors. In order for Ben Slayton to get to that point, well, he had some things that kind of broke his way. One, he was adopted, had a Jewish father. And even though he was adopted and had a Jewish father, it still wasn't easy for him to find someone who was willing to sponsor him. As Ben Slayton says, he said, I was down to my last straw. Finding somebody who would be willing to sponsor me and accept the title as as he says, an inward lover was going to be impossible at this time. In 1964, you could buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home in California for $5,000. It's a lot of money. $5,000. Essentially, a home is what his father loaned him and paid this person who would sponsor him to become a realtor. It cost him a house. Cost his parents a house. Now, the reason that I put an asterisk there and I say first black realtor is because that's only with the National Association of Realtors. Does anybody know what else there is outside of the National Association of Realtors where you had what we would call realtists be a part of? You shook your head.
Yes.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, this is why I do the quizzes, right? This makes it more fun.
You say outside the bar?
Outside of NAR. What other organizations could you be a part of? Even today, we have local chapters in Philadelphia.
Oh,
PMBR. NARA.
NARAC.
Oh.
You can be a part of NARAC. Now, this person right here is also who we would say is the first, one of the first black real estate professionals. He also has a nickname. I'll give you a hint. Most of his business was done in New York. I love the people who think they know and they look at me and they're just like, I don't know. You have the name. I literally gave you the answer behind me, but it's Philip Patton Jr.
Yeah.
He's known as the father of Harlem. Father of Harlem. Ah, you got it.
I was gonna say it, but
So
not that exactly, but I figured it was.
So talk to me, what do you know about
Yeah.
what do you know about this guy? Does anyone know why he's called the father of Harlem?
He helped establish Harlem, ownership in Harlem among African American people to such an extent that that's why it in many ways became known for what it was as a neighborhood.
Yeah. He founded the Afro-American Realty Company in New York and Harlem in 1904. By 1913, there was 50 to 70,000 Black Americans living in the Harlem area. who actually had access to real estate, who had access to not only buying and selling properties, but yet just being able to be tenants. Being able to say, I have a property that I can rent. Because prior to him moving from Boston, he was born in Boston, Massachusetts. His father was a barber. His mother was a hairdresser. And growing up, he had 2 other siblings. And his parents said, you're not just going to go to school and learn the stuff that they teach you in school, we're going to teach you trades. So by the time he was 13 years old, he was a full-fledged barber. And he moved because he wanted to increase his power, increase his wealth. He wanted to increase who he was. And of course, no matter what time in the world it is, the place you do that is in New York. You moved to New York, right? That's where you go. And that's exactly what he did. He moved down to New York in 1904. Decided he was going to be a major barber. That did not work out very well. Didn't work out at all. He was struggling. He actually ended up working as a janitor at a real estate company. And working as a janitor in a real estate company, he realized he actually liked what was happening. He liked the things that he saw outside of the fact that himself and other people that looked like him were not able to rent. He saved up enough money as a janitor to then go and open his own company. He got his first big break after struggling for about a year or so, when there was a disagreement between 2 landlords. 2 landlords, both owned properties, and one really, really disliked the other one. And he felt as though that since he hated him so much, and the properties were so close together, he should allow Black people to move into his property, because that really pissed the other landlord off. That was the thing to do. So here's what happened. They gave Philip an opportunity to actually go manage the properties and rent out the properties. And he filled up those units with all Black tenants. Less than a year later, he was now managing 12 different properties. A few years later, he owned a portfolio of his own of $1.5 million worth of assets. Let's revisit. So he went from being a struggling barber in New York to owning $1.5 million worth of assets. You ever heard of the Harlem Renaissance? Yes. The reason that came about, and a lot of that is attributed to the fact that Philip Patton was able to move into Harlem and help people build and thrive and survive in the Harlem area. So these are 2 people that when we look at the Black history of real estate and we look at being a realtor or being a realtist, being a real estate professional, these are the first 2 people that we look at. And here's what happened. He has also what he says, the very prejudice that has heretofore worked against us can be turned and used to our profit. What he did is he actually went out and he was able to convince a number of other Black professionals that were wealthy at the time to all invest $10. It was 5,000 different people to invest $10. And that's what he used, essentially creating the first hedge fund to go and acquire properties. Has anyone ever heard of Neil Parker? Neil Parker Realtors? You have? Yeah. It was one of the larger real estate companies in New York. That was actually 2 of his business partners. So they went and founded their own off of, after he expanded to Long Island, and then they went and founded their own real estate company, and they also grew. And then after Philip had passed away, he was 41 years old when he passed. Died from liver cancer. No matter how much money you have, it's still going to be a struggle. Okay. Died from liver cancer at 41, and Neil Parker Associates acquired his company and continued to work. No. Now, I mentioned NARED earlier. Y'all had time to think. So what is NARED?
National Association of Real Estate for
Black.
Black.
You just added that to later. So the B would have been the last one. You're so close. And Tiana, I heard you said, no, that's not right either. All right. National Association of Real Estate Brokers. There we go. Right? So we call them realtors. Members of NARAB are realtors. Now, here's the thing about NARAB. NARAB is not like NAR, where it is just one organization that people can be a part of. NARAB is actually created from a number of 13 different organizations. Okay? It was founded in Tampa, Florida back in 1947. And a part of it was because they were an advocacy group for Black professionals within real estate. And I say Black professionals in real estate, not just realtors, because it's appraisers, it's inspectors, brokers, anyone within the real estate industry, mortgage lenders, all would be a part of NARAB. Anybody ever heard of, I don't know, some law that was passed in like 1964 that allowed fair housing laws? Never heard of that? Yeah, that was probably what you would call the largest accomplishment from NARAB. They were a part of it.
Is PMBR under their Metropolitan Board?
So, yes, they're all different local chapters that follow up under NARAB. It was founded in, what's that founded in? 1940, or no, 1924, something like that.
I think Dave Hudson, right? Super Dave is the president of.
No, I think it's founder, but when's it founded though?
Yeah, but now I think Dave Hudson is. He's
I
the
wouldn't,
leader.
I wouldn't even be able to tell you who it is right now.
And then Annette Collier, who was president of the local chapter, now is the president of the Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors.
Yeah. Do we have anyone here who, so Annette's been around for, what, 35? More than 35 years. Does anyone know who Annette Collier is? You guys meet her? Okay, you say you're excited. I was just saying, is that a good thing? All right. Is that a good thing? Yeah, she's very active. So I may or may not say something that some people will find offensive. And if it is offensive, please let me know. And we could also have a discussion about it. Okay. Here's one of the things that I'm going to say is that when you look at National Association of Realtors prior to 1964, if you were Black or if you were a minority period, you were not allowed to be a part of it. If you look at NARAB, no matter when it was, that was never the case. Just because you were not Black did not mean you were not allowed to be a part of NARAB. The reason we say realtors and it's real estate professionals, because one, their mission is democracy and housing. Anyone who is looking forward to promoting fair housing were allowed to be a part of NARAB and still are allowed to be a part of NARAB nationwide, no matter where you are. The reason I started that and said that it may be offensive to some is because you still have a lot of people that say, I don't understand why that's the case. Right? There's this guy that you may or may not have heard of. His name is Booker T. Washington. Everybody ever heard of him? Yeah, National Business League. Right? Awesome guy. Done a lot of things. He's one of the, you want to say it, original founders of NARAB. And I say that because before you had NARAB, you had National Business League, was where most Black professionals were at the time, and then that funneled a lot of people into NARAB. And at the time it was, well, why let others into our organization when we're not allowed to be in their organization? And that's a question that's happened a lot. Right? In 1906, there was this, I could talk, there's an awesome fraternity called Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I may or may not happen to be a member of that organization. Right? And here's the thing, here's why I bring that up, because we were the first Black collegiate fraternity. Founded at Cornell. We were founded because of the fact that we were not allowed to be members of any other fraternities. And yet, today, some of the, I'm not going to say the most famous, but on social media, some of the most famous members that you might see are some of my brothers. Maybe because it's a little bit rare, you don't see it very often, and yet it happens. So let me ask you, how many people here knew about NARAB before we started this conversation? You get a lot of emails, are you? You're thinking about it? I mean, it's only right down the street if anybody would like to.
Learned a little something today and like knowing where it came from makes me, maybe want to learn more, get into that.
Yeah.
So I'm with the Asian Real Estate Association of America, ARIA. I'm the Secretary of Policy Chair, and we've done expos with NARAP. So like the minority organizations, including NARAP, which is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, NARAP, and then the Real Estate Alliance, which is the LGBTQ organization. So us four kind of minority organizations have teamed up to do a lot of programming together, expos, real estate, symposiums, policy work, advocacy work. So yeah, never miss a good outing.
So I just learned about ARAB today, and like maybe I'm ignorant, but I'm like, why am I paying not for all my stuff? Can ARAB give me my documents? Like, what is what?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah.
Everyone here is
Yeah. That's a great question for your brokers. So,
Can I get it? Like,
What's your question? Why you're paying money for NAR?
to NAR, like, can I not get my forms from NARAB? Like, since like I would rather identify with this.
You want to contribute to GPAR and NAR because they are the largest lobbying group in Washington DC, NAR, and they're in the cause of Congress every single day advocating for real estate legislation that we don't even know about. So if it wasn't for NAR, like people in Congress who are not real estate professionals would be passing laws that's going to impact you.
I don't understand why they're there. I'm just saying that if we have an organization that embodies all of real estate, why am I buying into one that just specializes in our field? I understand, like, you know, as realtors, like we, you know, I get it, specialize in that have forms, but if this organization does the same thing and has supported minorities from the very beginning, why can't I?
Yes, but they don't do the same things. There's different channels that they operate from, and they're a minority trade association as opposed to like an RPAC that has political influence on a greater level. They do have political influence, but not have political power.
I'll step into this. Remember, they're an advocacy group as well.
Money.
Okay, so as an advocacy group, there is political influence. It's done differently. The scene is different, right? So remember, 1964,
Right.
a lot of the fair housing that was still coming from NARAD.
Mhm.
Here's the other thing. When we just look at the size of the two organizations, NARAD is still much smaller.
Mhm.
Right? And it makes sense when you look at the primary makeup of NARAD versus National Association of Realtors. I mean, I would say, who all was in the room with us at the time? Leah, Tori, Lauren, JP, maybe Dan. I don't know. Back in 2019 when we.
No, I wasn't here.
You weren't here yet?
I was
like, you came right after. When we first started working on PEI programs for KW internationally, I remember that started right here in Philly. It started right down the street at 1619 Walnut. Right? That is something that we can attribute to KW Empower. And we've got the ability to work with Julie Lachey Israel. We actually wrote her job description so that she could come in and take over as the director of inclusion and belonging. And her involvement in NARAD was a part of the reason that she was awarded that opportunity to be the director of inclusion and belonging. She knew exactly what it took and what we needed in that role. All right, so we definitely still work together. I will tell you that we all still work together.
Solidarity.
Now, I mention all that stuff because when we come back to Philadelphia and we come back to the US, there's still a gap. There's still a wealth gap. There's a housing gap. Does anybody disagree with that before we move forward? No? Okay, great. If so, I was going to have some questions for you before I move forward. So, here's some fun facts. And I don't think that I would actually be happy about this very first one. This is a slide that I got to update. And the very first thing on there says that Philadelphia is the 12th most segregated metro in the US. Unfortunately, I had to update that from being 13th to 12th. There's a lot of places in Phoenix. There's a lot, I have a whole list up here actually, if you want it.
Jared, what were the years between the statistics? Like, did it have to do with like COVID years? Like, what was the gap? Why did that?
No, so, this is actually moving from 2022 to 2024. Yeah. Yep, from 2022 to 2024. Now, here's what I will say that, I'm using 12 now versus 13, and yet there are some areas that you'll look at that will actually have Philadelphia at 9. Okay? You'll have Philadelphia at 9. At least 12 sounds better. Okay? At least 12 sounds better. What that means is that when you look at minorities, when you look at Blacksmith and the city of Philadelphia, we have 64% less access to major important amenities, even within our school system. We have 62% less access to traditional financing. I know that sounds very interesting. Like, what do you mean we have 62% less access to traditional financing? Well, because there's still major gaps when it comes to who is approved and who are denied for loans. 2 to 3 times more likely to be denied for loans. I put 2 to 3 times because it also depends on what you're looking at, whether you're looking at conventional loans and FHA. And FHA surprisingly is high for a lot of people, but it sits at about 31% for blacks to be denied for an FHA loan. And it's interesting when you look at it because it's not 100. We're not saying that, okay, we're taking absolutely all the people with the worst credit. No, it's when you look at things being equal, we're still 2 to 3 times more likely to be denied for a loan. $24 billion wealth gap. That's in housing. That means when you look at the fact that there were restrictive covenants that literally kept minorities and literally kept, by the way, this is specifically for blacks in Philadelphia. It jumps to $37 billion when you include all minorities. Figured I'd throw that part out there. All right. So $24 billion housing wealth gap. What that's talking about is the fact that we were not able to purchase homes within the Philadelphia area in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Restrictive covenants were outlawed technically in 38, but not everybody cared about the restrictive covenants. And when you look at the appreciation values over time, when you look at the median home values, this is where that $24 billion wealth gap comes in. $103,000 less housing per homeowner, which means that if I'm buying a home and someone that does not look like me is purchasing a home, then the value that we may have is likely going to be a $103,000 difference. Okay? 30.8% of Philadelphia's black population lives in poverty. By the way, does anybody know what it means to live in poverty in the U.S. there in the city?
It's absurdly low.
Is it in 30? Household income
Is
is
it
it 30?
less than 30? What'd you say?
I said less than 40.
Less than 40?
Less than 23.
Less than 20?
That's in 15.
Used to be less than 23.
Okay.
15,000.
How much?
15,000.
15,000?
27.
It's like
It's by $26,000. So you're not considered poor unless you're making less than $26,000, by the way.
Household.
And the median rent is like $2,200 a month, so figure that out, like that's important to live there.
So interesting. we're going to get to rent in a second. I love the rent stuff.
So I have sitting in a lot of these classes, every year, past few years, you do our Black History Month, presentation, which I love, you do a great job, but I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I look at like these percentages and it doesn't hit home because what? So real quick, 'cause I started doing this a couple years ago,
Yeah.
when you were talking actually, and so I did it again this year because I wanted to get the numbers for it, so I looked up the total population of the city of Philadelphia, it's like 1.5 million people. So I said, okay, fine. Then I looked up what is the African American population in Philadelphia, and it's 40%. 40% of 1.5 million, 600,000 folks are black here in the city of Philadelphia, and if you say 30% of them some change live in poverty, that's 180,000 people right here, just in the city, not Pennsylvania, in the city of Philadelphia, that make less than that $26,000 a year or whatever, can't even afford to rent here. Definitely won't be able to afford to buy here. So that's what like quantitative, like it's 180,000 people of one demographic here in the city that are poor. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's other things, we look at credit, there's also gaps that fall through housing, or we can look at gaps through education. When you look at the numbers, they're very similar. Homeownership and education. Homeownership and obviously income. Huge factors. Why is that important? Because that's honestly where we get to make the biggest changes. That's where we get to make the biggest impacts. We're gonna have fun. Yeah, we're gonna have fun. Because I'm gonna let everybody in this. So this right here is one of the reasons that I decided to make the change. I was going through the DEI portion for Philadelphia, going through their information in my research, and I found this and I loved it. And it said that one, racial equity is both an outcome and a process. And I was like, ooh, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Racial equity is both an outcome and a process. It's something that we're looking forward to accomplishing, and yet it takes a lot of work. And when we say it takes a lot of work, when we're looking at housing segregation, it means that we get to break down those barriers of housing segregation. We get to break down the barriers of poverty within the city. We get to break down the barriers with access to healthcare within the city and the income in the city. And the question is, how do we do that? There's a lot of things that we look at that has been approved federally and locally, that when we look at it, we say, okay, that's amazing for the minority population. That's going to allow them to be able to own more, and it's wonderful. One of those things are grants. We love grants. We're going to use the heck out of grants. And yet, where's a lot of that funding coming from?
Federal government.
Foundation.
There's some that comes from the federal government.
Foundations, syndicates, the government, like fines from big banks that have
Say that part. Say that part again.
fines by financial institutions that have been adjudicated by the Department of Justice. So billions of dollars from like Wells Fargo that has a history of redlining and other interest rate shark loans towards African Americans and minority communities. So it's coming from a lot of these fines.
I mean, last year alone in the greater Philadelphia area, we looked at about $24 million worth of funding that came from lawsuits alone for housing distribution. Some of the banks I never heard of before. I mean, I was looking at this stuff, and it's funny because there's actually someone who, they're sitting in the room, they're not in the room, I saw them the other day. And they was like, yeah, I'm using this thing. I was like, I've never heard of that thing. Then I started doing research, and I was like, hey, that's that bank. Has anyone ever heard of Oceans First?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I had never heard of Oceans First. Not even a lot. I
They're
saw
terrible
it.
to get a payoff from.
You see what?
They're terrible to get a payoff
All right. Well, see, now I have two reasons not to want to work with them, right? But I'm just looking around at the number of lawsuits and settlements that we have just in 2024 alone. We're looking at about $24 million worth of funds that are going back into the grants. I love it, and let's also realize it's because people would rather pay fines than actually follow the law. I mean, I'll be one of those people. Anybody here wait until the end of the year to pay taxes?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you get a small fine for paying those taxes late. And yet, if your monies are actually sitting into an account that is income producing, you're likely going to make more money from that than you would paying the fine.
Yeah.
Right? So you're okay with paying the fine. It's the same exact thing here.
Parking ticket, because you don't want to walk in heels too far, so say fucking the ticket.
It costs me $26 to pay a parking ticket and $36 to park. I'll pay the ticket.
That part.
And then they get the loans back. And here's the other part. Here's the other kicker to it. Who has access to the grants? Everyone. Can you still be denied for a grant?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what are some of the reasons that you can be denied for a grant?
Credit.
Credit,
Income.
income.
Those classes and those quizzes you have to take in English.
That's an income.
Hmm.
Do you realize that debt to income ratio is one of the #1 reasons for minorities to actually be denied for a loan, for a mortgage period?
One of the top consumers in the US. Black folks are
Yeah.
top consumers in the US.
So what do we do as realtors? Educate.
Yeah.
By the way, this is where we all play a part, right? I say we're gonna do some masterminding. My goal is not only for us to have this information, it's now to be able to leave the room and be able to use this information.
Mhm.
One of the things that I will die on the hill for is it's not a goal of mine, it's a mission of mine. Some of you who know my story, you know that, I was born and raised for the most part in Miami. And I've been homeless twice in my life. And because of that, I've always had a goal or a mission of being able to provide at least one home a year. I'm not there yet. I'm working towards it, right? I'd love to be able to say, hey, here's a family, here's a house, it's paid off, you don't have anything to worry about. That's something that I'm looking forward to being able to do. My question is, what is it that you were looking forward to being able to do? With the people that are in front of you right now, with your clients that you have right now. I'm not going to pick on anyone in the room, and yet, if I'm not mistaken, I think someone has like 57 new clients from Instagram, if I was looking at Instagram correctly, right? She's like, I'm not going to look at you. It's okay. So what are we going to do? What are you going to do?
To advocate those grant programs, like, and educate our clients about it, our peers about it. I sat in a meeting last week and learned that it's not just for like grant programs, but even other initiatives that maybe, the city, that we have these advocates like the NAR, smaller chapters that go and win these awesome things for us in our community, in our real estate community, for example, the 10-year tax abatement. And I listened to the people who were out there fighting to get this abatement for us to use. They literally told us we failed at educating the community and actually utilizing, and we did not have enough properties under the 10-year tax abatement to achieve the goal in which we did in the first place. And when that was said, that hit me hard because the tax abatement is a huge problem, especially in some of our African American communities here in Philadelphia, who their taxes, their on fixed income now, these people that are being so hard hit by it. And now their taxes have like tripled, quadrupled, and they're losing their homes at the later parts of their life because the people in the community did not do a good job at educating them, filling the forms out, making sure they were taken care of, and they could get these abatements. So the same thing happens with these grant programs. These lawsuits are won, the money is there, it's available, but we're not advocating and educating the community, our peers, and doing a good enough job at making sure we are utilizing those funds and we are getting that money back into the community that was fought to get it in the first place, not just like the.
So I love that, and I'm going to piggyback on that for two reasons. One, education is the number one thing on a document. And while it's our opportunity to educate others, we also get to educate ourselves daily. If we don't understand, if we don't know, we're not going to be able to teach anyone else. So when it comes to the tax abatements, do you understand how to complete them? Or do you think that you close on a home and they advertise that there was a tax abatement in the listing, and now when you sign all your docs, there's nothing else for you to do? So boom, a year later, you're getting a call from a client because your taxes just went up. Now, yes, the taxes are going to still go up slightly, right? So let them know that part ahead of time. But yeah, it's different than buying a $469,000 home in Fishtown with a tax abatement at $467, and then over the next 8 years it goes up to about $1,100. Than it would be to buy that same $469,000 home in Fishtown, and 8 years later, now you're looking at taxes of almost $6,000. By the way, that's just a scenario from a client that we have, and no, the taxes did not go up. We made sure the paperwork was complete, but that would have been their difference in taxes. Right? Yes.
So I work for a political action committee, and so I'm in city council often, and I think we should have like a contingency to actually interact with city council, especially the chairwoman of the housing committee, which is Jamie Gautier. And Mayor Sherelle Parker has committed to building 30,000 units in the city of Philadelphia.
Yep.
So how is that going to be built? So I think we need to be part of the conversation. I think a lot of affordable housing is being built in the city, but the affordable housing through the RFP process by the land bank is going to minority developers who are actually not really minority developers or not Black minority developers, and so we need to have more development opportunities. And the affordable housing that they're building are like 300 to 500,000, and they're also like we also have this process where the developer has to meet with the client and it's first come first served. Buyers agents will not be involved in that process, so there's no negotiation and you can't bring your clientele. So you just it's first come first served, and these folks that are coming in to get the affordable housing are like the middle to high income making 70 to 120K a year. So there's the lack of access to those properties without any negotiations at all. And then the tax abatement, the OPA reassessments, we need to subpoena the Office of Property Assessment because they have a camera system that has a computational algorithm that doesn't have any kind of predictable outcomes. It's very volatile, which creates massive volatility where taxes in certain neighborhoods for certain folks would jump double or triple, and in areas that are developing, causing a massive issue with appeals for our tax issues, and then also the land bank review for the RFP process for liquidation.
Yeah, and has anyone ever gone through the land bank process, the RFP process? How much fun is that?
It's not.
No,
Like you.
zero.
Yeah, don't you enjoy writing those 10-page documents only to hear nothing back?
Great system.
It's a wonderful system. Now, man, I'm gonna jump onto something you said, and then I'm not gonna stay on it because I have another slide of information that I want to go to that's gonna tie in with that. Okay? And yet, when we talk about the affordable housing, like you said, $300,000 to $500,000. I'm sorry, who was that affordable for, right? When we talk about the developers, I've met with a lot of the developers and minority developers that are getting these. I would say there's one or two in particular that I absolutely love. They're amazing. The only people I know that right now, they will go in and develop property and, their fees on top of everything are low, 10% or less. I'm not going to put the name for this particular person or these people out there. I don't want you to dislike any of the other people who are building and doing things like that. And yet you should know who you're working with, right? We always say that clients work with us and clients work with people that they know, like, and trust. Who are the people that you know, like, and trust within the real estate industry in Philadelphia? The other thing you mentioned, see, I take notes so I can go back because my memory is not great. You mentioned Sherelle Parker. How many of you know that, like, Sherelle Parker is literally out in the community and talking to people and assisting people all the time? She's doing a ton of work in the Germantown area. And when I say a ton of work, I don't mean just going out there and telling people to vote. I mean literally hosting and helping people figure out how to take care of their taxes.
She's your mom. She's coming out of the state by accident.
Say that again?
I met her by accident coming out of the listing, and she was like, "Oh, ma'am, do you own this house?" And I was like, "No, I'm a real estate agent." And she was like, "Oh, I was like, I know who you are." And I was like, "What are you doing here?" Because I'm like, "What are you doing out here? What's the like nicest street?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm knocking on my constituents' doors, asking if they understand their property tax bill." Da, 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 da. I was like, "Holy shit!"
This was after she was elected mayor.
Yeah, after, yeah.
This is after, even after.
Recent,
Yeah.
like literally recently. I was
We
like,
were-
oh my god.
I know one of her line sisters. One of her line sisters, she's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Lives in the Germantown area. I'm not going to say what street it's on. And they host events all the time. I mean, she was literally out there helping people fill out documentation so that they could do their, why is it escaping me? Homestead exemptions. Thank you. Right? This is the type of stuff that when we think of leadership and when we think of who we are as realtors, we can do the same thing. I love the home buying seminars. That's wonderful. And what other classes are out there that we could be teaching and showing such that we can be a benefit and a value to people, not only to purchase the home, and yet also once they purchase.
We could have had a class how to fill these tax forms. I mean, there's like all types of stuff.
I heard maintenance, tax forms, I heard budgeting. Yeah. I saw a hand.
State says one thing that a lot of African Americans are moving is property by the loved one passing away and no one understanding the proper process.
I was about to
And there's a lot of realtors, and I've come in contact with them before I got my license in Epic, that play a really sick game to acquire the property, lie to, our community and their potential need or client and get the listing and sell it. In 2000, some years back, had to be about 10 years ago, there was an agent that actually finally got caught selling, African American property, out under them, without them even knowing. They never signed no paperwork with them. He sold over 100 homes during this process. And the sad part is, he was with a brokerage, a well-known brokerage. They knew. It's not, a lot of this stuff is by design as well. There's a blatant want to be ignorant to the facts. It, we're gonna just ignore it until a lawsuit enough to shut us down. Because a lawsuit, and you can just pop back up, or, you know, some slap on the wrist. Some of these brokerages and some of these agents should literally just be fired.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I will say this, I think we do a good job of, of doing that when we need to, right? There's also a developer in the city. I'm not gonna say who this particular developer is. They want a large tract of land in what used to be, actually Black Bottom. Now, the Philadelphia version of Black Bottom, not the Detroit Black Bottom. All right, we'll talk about that as well. Philadelphia Black Bottom. They purchased large tract of land. They built quite a few homes. They had everything else designed and zoned, ready to complete the construction. And what they didn't tell the buyers was that they also went ahead and refinanced all of the land in their homes again, such that they could continue to fund the rest of their construction project. I only found out because I actually happened to go on a listing appointment, and the person who thought they owned the home did not own the home because the developer actually owned the home thanks to the refinancing the property.
Who was it?
I will not say. Everything is researchable.
What was the price point of these homes?
Those particular homes at the time, you're probably looking between $183,000 to $225,000. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to bring up something, we talk about the poverty line, but it's also, there is a huge Black middle class that exists that can also contribute, right? Whether through education or buying within the community. This just happened to me last week showing a house in Grace Ferry, where it was a middle class, single guy, African American, who was like, oh, I'm not buying in a Black neighborhood. I would show me stuff in Graduate Hospital, show me stuff in Queens Village, because his attitude was basically, I worked my way out. Why are you showing me houses in this neighborhood? I want, it's the attitude almost of my money, I want to be seen as being at a higher level. And that is equated to being in a white neighborhood.
And that's where we get to educate. And that's a whole other conversation in class on its own. We're meeting on Friday. We can talk about that. Yeah. Lauren.
I mean, I think at a very basic level, two very important items that, we can work on as a real estate community have to do with, I mean, as most of you know, I'm an admin, so I see this from the back end. It has to do with proper identification. So like helping people make sure that they have their IDs, licenses, non-driver IDs, making sure everything's up to date is a huge issue. And then the second part of that is like chain of title. I've seen this on one of your houses, and I've definitely seen this happen in tests where people, because houses are passed down differently in a lot of Black and minority communities, chain of title is very frequently interrupted. And sometimes people's families have been living in these houses for 100 years. They don't have a deed, a current deed. They have one from 6 family members ago, and they can't prove that they own the home. And it's very difficult, and not enough people know the process and know how to advocate for figuring out how to do that. And some of that is not being able to get the word out in the community. Like, how do you identify those homes, and how do you make sure that people feel safe coming forward so that you can help fix the problem before you go ahead and sell the house?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I know the last time I took this class, we did a lot on restrictive covenants and some of the deeds that you could find in certain areas around Philly, especially in like Bala, where If it's not an updated deed, you will still see the wording that this property or this parcel of land or this tract is not to be conveyed to Negroes. Which they're still working on changing. Well, for the most part, there's also still a lawsuit on saying that we don't need to take the word again, in the state of Pennsylvania. That's an active lawsuit. And why do I bring that up? I bring up the gap, I bring up all the information and ask how do we fix it, because here's what we don't want. What we don't want is a repeat of some of the places that I have up on the board right now. How many of you have heard of any of these places I have up on the board? How many of you have heard of these places outside of Black Wall Street? All right, that actually makes me feel really good. All right, because here's what we're looking at. When I say Black Wall Street, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The fire,
Fire, bombing,
Success.
success. What about success?
It was a thriving Black community. They owned their own homes, they had rent, they had mortgages, they had lenders, they had everything. It was, because at the time it was, you know, we had to do it on our own. Successful schools. It was a community that did not depend on, the other counterparts that had an issue with us and other ethnic groups that had an issue with us in the United States. So it was a proven statement, that we didn't need them for that either.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem. It was so thriving. They didn't think we could thrive after slavery without them in that way. And so they destroyed it. But before it was destroyed, it was extremely successful.
Yeah, so successful. You had 600 businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, 6 private airplanes, hospital, bank, post office, schools, libraries, law offices, and a bus system.
Where's Oscar Village Hall, like outside of where Lake Lanier is now?
No, this is Black Wall Street.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Lake Lanier is in
That's a
Georgia.
whole nother thing,
Yeah.
that's another private Black, because literally underneath the lake now.
And that,
Most of your lakes were.
so, and that's why up here I put Black Mountain and Paradise Valley, right? So Black Mountain and Paradise Valley is in the Detroit area. They're the same and they're not. They're actually two communities that were right next to each other. One was more so, Black Mountain was more so a thriving middle class neighborhood. Paradise Valley was their city. It was where all of their businesses and everything were, right? So you had a neighborhood and then you actually had the city outside of it. Rosewood, Overtown, Fillmore, Sweet Auburn, Bronzeville. Yes, I know I skipped one. Which one did I skip? Who knows what that is? I see smiles. North Carolina. North Carolina. It's where you had a lot of people who were freed slaves, went to Haiti, North Carolina, and thrived with businesses. It was another Black Wall Street before Black Wall Street. Here's why I bring this up, because this is what occurs with education. One of my favorite things that we have the opportunity of doing every year is an event that we put on called OwnerCon. And with OwnerCon, it's not a help people buy a home, it's a, hey, you've done something, you have something, you own something, let us show you how to use that to accomplish more. Let us show you how to take your equity and use that to fund more parts of your life, and use that to fund your future, and use that to impact the other people around you. I think we're bringing OwnerCon to Philly this year, if I'm not mistaken. I will tell you more about that as I get that information. And, you know, I trust that this class is very different than how I usually talk. Typically in the past, for 1 hour, I'd come up here, I'd stand up here, and I would just give you an hour worth of information and an hour worth of facts, and then you would go and you'd be like, that was interesting, I learned something. Here's my question for you. Is there anything that you were able to take away from communicating with each other that now you can implement the moment that you walk out of the room? If not, we still have 6 minutes before testing and get up that we can try to figure out what that would be. Because that's my goal. Yes.
Well, something I started to do, and my lender suggested this is we do the homestead exemption at the closing table with my buyers, and but now I better understand like just the impact of it. Like I know it helps them. Every year later, they're like, "Oh, Tiana, like you know, my taxes did X, Y, Z." But now I'm just understanding the impact of that, and I'm going to continue.
I love that. Love that. Anybody else?
I think you just have to intentionally vet the people, like partners and vendors that I work with, because I have so much influence on who my clients end up working with, that if I know that I'm recommending people who want to be part of these solutions, it's going to help everything overall as well.
I absolutely love that. And I love that you said do a better job at vetting, because obviously, yes, we partner with people after a few conversations. Dig into what they have been doing, dig into where funds have been going, things of that nature. Who they represent, who they support, how they support them. Yes.
Yeah, join NAREP, NAREP, ARIA, the Real Estate Alliance, and also other organizations. Who's the DI chairs of the AOC this year?
That is
Right behind.
right behind you.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, who is the?
I was like, I thought you were over here now.
Martin. Okay, I feel happy that Martin's in that position because she's incredible. So yeah, I think we can consolidate all of this like curriculum. That would be great. Julia Shea's curriculum is also really great. Her presentations as well. Like I can't find it anywhere publicly. So if we had access to all of this curriculum in like one Google Drive, that would be great. And then like I think the DI committee can do more like inclusive programming. But all of the work that we've done over the last 5 years has been incredible. So go DI.
I think for Julia's stuff, you can find it if you go to KW Connect, go to resources. There is a belonging and inclusion hub. In the belonging and inclusion hub, you'll find everything for belonging. It's been changed from DEI to belonging and inclusion. We were ahead of the curve because we already knew that this was coming. So there we go. Belonging and inclusion is what you'll look for on KW Connect.
And the Belonging and Inclusion Committee can always use more hands to do more things, because
Yes.
the truth of it is, there are about 3 or 4 people who show up to those meetings and make everything happen, and it's just not enough people to make sure that everyone is getting access to diversity initiatives and education, things like that. So the more people on board to help get things done, the better, because it is fully voluntary. So if you have an interest, it also means the more people that help, the less you have to do. It's also important.
Wait, are we changing DEI to belonging and inclusion?
It has already happened.
It's already happened.
Because
It's national.
Because we're afraid of the political retaliation.
No, this was done before that came out.
Okay.
Yep.
It was.
The conversation began like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
About-
It's one of the reasons that when Julia took, if you notice, when Julia took over, she was never DEI chair. She came in as the director of belonging and inclusion.
AKA DEI. Okay, but
It's just a title. Yep, that's me. The slides?
Yeah.
I'll send the slides to someone and they will get the slides. I thought Ella was here first. I was like, she'll get it.
Real quick, lunch is here to thank you all for coming and engaging and everything. It means a lot. Next event, Women's Empowerment Day, Women's Day, March 11th, please be there.
Yeah, there's a lot that our office has done. By the way, I'm done, so if you want to walk out, you can. There's a lot that our office has done. Honestly, if you look at the growth that KW itself has had, and I don't just mean with bringing in minorities as realtors, just overall in leadership, it literally all goes back to this office. And we were the first real estate office in the city of Philadelphia to put something together to influence minority realtors. Not just to get people licensed, but also to teach them how to run businesses. And that is what ultimately took off and became the login guide for KWRI. So it's a lot. If you would like to visit or see the original charter, I still have a copy of the original charter. Because to me, that is what is important, is that we consistently follow that.